The holding annex at Den's post shared a wall with the mess kitchen, which meant I knew about the impounded dragon before I ever saw him. You hear things through institutional walls, the particular silence of something that won't eat, the sound the welfare log makes when you tap in another zero on the intake column. It's the same tap as any other entry, but you know it by context. 11 days, according to the morning briefing I overheard through the vent. 11 days of refused protein trays, one water intake, and a behavioral flag that said aggressive posture. Do not approach without escort. Relocation to a Class C holding facility in 30 days if intake remained below threshold. I was at Den's post because my reassignment request to the Corval system had been denied 7 months running, and someone at the posting office had decided a frontier resettlement station needed a mess cook badly enough to pull me from the inner circuit. I had been making the same soup in the same rotation for 8 months, and I was not, at that point, inclined toward charity in any direction. But the wall was thin, and I am a practical person. On day 12, I filed a standard equipment repositioning notice and moved 3 kitchen warming units to the annex side of the shared wall. The units pushed heated air through the vent grid. It wasn't a dramatic gesture. The holding annex registered as a cold corner space on the building's climate assessment. The heater for that section had been malfunctioning since before I arrived, and no one had filed a repair order because the annex was a temporary use space, and temporary use spaces at Den's post tended to stay broken until someone got tired of being cold in them. I was not cold in them, but the dragon was. The welfare log on day 13 showed an intake figure above 0 for the first time since arrival. I didn't tell anyone that was related to the warmers. I just noted the equipment repositioning in my kitchen log and went back to making soup. His name, I learned this later, was Orath. At the time, the depot records listed him as impounded fauna, classification, juvenile draconic designation, pending status, non-compliant. He had come in with a resettlement convoy that had been rerouted at the border checkpoint, his clutch group separated from him in the shuffle and processed through a different hub. The wing injury was old, a cold season fusion of the secondary joint, healed but permanently stiff on one side. He held it close, the way you'd carry an arm you'd stopped expecting much from. I saw him for the first time on day 15 when the annex escort was short-staffed, and the welfare officer asked if I'd carry the tray through. I said yes, because the kitchen was between breakfast and lunch service and I had time. He was in the left corner, the same way the last one had been. Big animals in confined spaces always go to the corner with the most wall behind them. He was amber-scaled, deep and warm where the light caught the ridges, and he had a juvenile's proportions, body not yet caught up with the length of his neck. His clear eye tracked me from the door. The fused wing was tucked flat and tight. I set the tray down inside the gate. He didn't move. I stood there for a moment because I had nowhere particular to be, and then I went back to the kitchen. He ate. The log confirmed it that evening. Over the next 2 weeks I carried the tray when I could, which was most days. I didn't approach beyond the gate. I didn't talk to him. I'm not one for narrating myself at animals. It always struck me as more for the human than the creature. I just set the tray, stood for a moment, and left. The warmers kept running through the shared wall. By week 3, he was orienting toward the kitchen before I came around the corner, tracking the heat source, I assumed, or maybe the smell of whatever was on the tray. It was hard to say. He had the stillness of a young thing that had learned early not to waste movement on things that didn't resolve. The relocation order came through on a Thursday. The welfare review had delayed it twice. Intake above threshold, behavioral flag downgraded from aggressive to cautious. But the depot supervisor had a space use problem, and 30 days was 30 days. I found out when I went to file my kitchen log, and the supervisor's assistant mentioned it in passing, the way people mention things they don't expect to land. I said nothing at the time. I went back to the kitchen and I made dinner. That night I stayed late for the end-of-shift equipment check, the way I always did. The kitchen was quiet. The warmers were still running through the vent. I could hear, very faintly, the sound of Oreth settling, the particular slide of scales on composite flooring that I'd learned to recognize the way you learn any ordinary sound in a space you inhabit long enough. I was running the burner diagnostic when the exterior proximity alert went off. Not the station alarm, just the standard approach ping, the one that sounds when a ship enters the depot's clearance corridor. I assumed it was the overnight freight run and paid it no attention for about 30 seconds until the second ping came in on the restricted channel, which the overnight freight run does not use. I went to the kitchen window. The ship was already in the yard. It was not large, a courier-class vessel, which surprised me, because the restricted channel is usually diplomatic or military. Two figures descended the ramp. One was a human interpreter I recognized from the resettlement office's translation registry list. I'd seen her name on intake forms. The other was a dragon. Old, the kind of old that reads in the way an animal carries itself when it has stopped needing to prove anything. Deep copper scales, weathered to a matte finish at the joints and along the spine, and a wingspan that she kept fully folded with the ease of long practice. She moved through the yard like someone who had arrived at many places in her long life and found them all more or less what she expected. I met them at the annex door because I was the only one in that part of the building. The interpreter introduced the copper dragon as the Varath Clutch Warden, a title I didn't know, though I understood the word Varath from the resettlement paperwork as referring to the sovereign lineage. She had been tracking a metabolic signature for 4 months, the interpreter said, across 3 sectors. The signature had gone quiet at the border reshuffle, then reappeared 11 days ago at Den's post. 11 days ago was when I moved the warmers. The Clutch Warden's tracking system read metabolic heat signatures from clutch line members. Specifically, the thermal output profile that juvenile dragons of the sovereign line produce only when their body temperature is adequately maintained. Below a certain threshold, the profile collapses and the tracker goes silent. Oreth had been below threshold since the border crossing. The warmers had brought him back above it. The Clutch Warden entered the annex and lowered her head to the floor in front of Oreth's pen. He rose slowly, the fused wing held careful, and pressed his forehead to hers through the gate. It was a short contact, quiet, and when she raised her head again, her expression had shifted into something I couldn't fully read but recognized as relief. The interpreter said the warden wished to know who had maintained the warmth. I said I had repositioned some kitchen equipment. The interpreter translated. The warden made a sound low, sustained, a frequency I felt at the base of my sternum, and then spoke at some length. The interpreter said, "She names you Vorn Sethari. In the Varath High Register, it means the one who kept the fire present. It's the title given to a clutch keeper who sustains a line member through a separation. She says Oreth is the 4th-generation heir of the sovereign clutch. She says his survival carries a lineage obligation, and you have met it." I have been making soup and repositioning kitchen heaters. She also says, the interpreter continued, that the clutch line will log this station as a recognized waypoint under Varath protection. Any resettlement convoys processed through Den's post will be given clutch line priority status in the border registry. The relocation order for Oreth was rescinded the following morning. The depot supervisor did not argue about it, which surprised me until I realized the Varath charter notation on the station's registry was worth more to the depot's processing quota than the annex floor space. My transfer request to the Corval system was approved 3 weeks later, 8 months of denials overturned in a single administrative cycle, which I'm told had nothing to do with the Varath notation, though I have my opinions about that. I filed a count request to stay. The kitchen is the same. The warmers are still on the annex wall, logged as permanent installation now rather than equipment repositioning. Orath's wing will never fully open, but he uses it to shield the warmer vent on cold mornings, angled just so, and I've started thinking of that as a kind of conversation. The tray goes in. He eats. I go back to the kitchen. Some mornings the copper ship is in the yard and the clutch warden is in the annex, and we pass each other at the door without ceremony, and that seems right to me. We are both people who show up and do the work. I don't know what the Vareth High Register sounds like when it isn't being translated, but I know what it sounds like when the warmers are running and Orath has eaten and the annex is quiet, and I'll take that.